Hi guys, this is Michael from Bird Channel, and today we're going to talk about AP Bio Unit 4, the cell communication. Let's dive in. So for cell communication, we start with the cell signaling. So about the cell signaling goes through these 4 steps, which is stimulus, signal release, signal reception, and response. And how are these cell signaling functioning? They function through ligands. Ligands are the chemical messengers that are received by the cells. There's these kind of small dots that float around the cell or inside the cell that goes to the receptor that binds to specific receptor protein and creates the reaction. And because there is a complementarity between shape and distribution of charge, they only affect those with the receptors, which means that they only bind to particular receptors that are designated. So the example for the cell signaling is the quorum sensing. Quorum sensing usually happens in the prokaryotes where the density-dependent manner is observed. Density-dependent manner means that if there's more density of population, there's more signaling molecules that are binding, and which means that the reaction is amplified. And the biggest example for this would be the bioluminescence. The second example would be the adrenaline. Adrenaline comes out from the fight or flight response, which is signaling molecule, where the signaling molecule from adrenal glands are released and they bind to specific receptor, which makes our body produce adrenaline. There's also more types of signaling that we learn in AP Bio. The first thing would be the endocrine signaling, which is between a long distance through a circulatory system. The second thing that we learn is the paracrine signaling, which occurs in the short distance, for example, like neighboring cells, and they signal through diffusion. And diffusion is a behavior where a molecule moves from the high concentration to low concentration. And the biggest example would be when you drop ink on the water, then the ink diffuses and it spreads out to the entire water. The last one would be the autocrine signaling, which means that the signaling is happening inside the cell itself. Except for these 3 types of signaling, there is also some cells that depend on direct contact. And this will be the gap junctions in the animals and plasmodesmata in plants. So if you look at the drawing over here, this part is what we call as a gap junction. It's some part that it's a part of each animal cell intersects, and this part are the plant cells intersecting, which we call as plasmodesmata. Now let's move on to communication and homeostasis. Communication and homeostasis work some kind of in a similar way of cell signaling. And homeostasis is a dynamic process for maintaining steady conditions. It basically means that our body tends to not change. It tries to stay in a stable temperature range and a stable body condition. And what makes it stable like that, and what makes it remain in that situation, is called homeostasis. So the biggest example of homeostasis happens when the temperature is cold. So the cold temperature becomes a stimulus to our body, and then that was the real world example, my bad. So the cold temperature becomes a stimulus in our body, and then the signal goes to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus, why is it so hard to pronounce? Hypothalamus orders the muscles to shiver to create heat, and then the heat comes out, and when the heat reaches a certain level, then the hypothalamus tells the muscle to stop shiver, and we call that function as a negative feedback. There's also some examples with the sugar too. When a sugar enters a body, your blood sugar level goes up. Then the liver, and that becomes a signal which makes the liver produce more insulin. And the more insulin it gets produced, the lower sugar level it becomes, and then the body returns to normal. And in a certain level, when the blood sugar level reaches a normal point, then the liver's insulin production goes down. And the biggest example for the error in homeostasis would be the diabetes. The lack of insulin produced. Yep, that was all for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll come back with Unit 4, Chapter 2 of AP Bio. Thank you.